Come, Holy Spirit, come. The words of my lips and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Be seated. Are you tired of the bread of life discourses from John yet? This is our fourth one in a row. Anybody else a little tired? I've been on vacation for half of it, and I'm tired of it. And to make matters worse, because I believe it to be unavoidable, I'm going to preach on it. And it's going to be one of those doctrine sermons where we talk about the Holy Eucharist, because Jesus says, if you eat my body, if you drink my blood, you will have everlasting life. I think that lends itself to a sermon about the Eucharist. And doctrinal sermons can sometimes be a little boring. So the good news is I'm going to sandwich this around a story, a happy story. And maybe that'll make it go down a little better, okay? So here's the happy story. I remember preaching on this lesson 24 years ago. I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I remember preaching on this lesson 24 years ago. And I remember because we had some guests that day. Now, 24 years ago, we had a bunch of kids, little ones. And my poor wife had to stay at home with them, and then to make a little money, she brought in other kids. So at any given time, there were 6 little kids running around my house first thing in the morning. To help out, I would greet the door at dark 30 and bring the kids in. And we had this one lady who would drop off her daughter Laura. Her name was Leon. And Leon would only see me, again, at dark 30. And I'm not a morning person. I don't know if you know this about me. And until I've had that first cup of coffee, you don't even want to talk to me. And here I am saying, oh, good morning, and I'm in my robe. And she goes, and you're a priest, right? I said, yeah. I said, Leon, why don't you come one Sunday? Take a day off from, I think they went to the Methodist church. Take a day off, come over and just check it out. She said, okay, and today was that day. All right, so the rest of the story at the end. So I want to talk about Holy Communion. I want to talk about what is the miracle. I want to talk about who is involved, who can receive. And I want to talk about what are the benefits. So the first thing is, we believe in the Episcopal Church that Holy Eucharist is a sacrament. And a sacrament is an outward and visible sign of a... Excellent. All right. We're well informed. And every sacrament has 3 things about it. It has that outward and visible sign, the bread and the wine, the inward spiritual grace, becomes the body and blood, thank you, and you have the appropriate minister to do the sacrament. So, some sacraments require certain ministers. What kind of ministers require a priest? What kind of sacraments require a priest? Okay, our baptism and wedding, you're both wrong. Any baptized Christian may baptize another Christian. And at the wedding, I don't marry anybody. The bride and the groom take one another in holy matrimony. I just preside and pronounce the blessing of the church. But communion, you do need a priest or a bishop. The other 2 sacraments that require a bishop are Ordination and confirmation. There you go. And the orders of ministry are, 4 orders are what? Bishops, priests, deacons, laity. You are ministers. As a matter of fact, you're the most important ministers. Because if you go out into the world and you're excited about Jesus, that's going to be a lot more impressive than me being excited about Jesus because I get paid to be. Right? If I knock on the door and I say, hey, have you heard about Jesus? Oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a minister. Oh, you get paid. But you, in your workplace, in your day in and day out life, if you're excited about Jesus, that's going to make a difference for the kingdom. My job is just to help you stay excited. Right? So let's get excited. Let's get excited about communion because it is a miracle. And it does, in our tradition, require a priest. We're an apostolic church. What does that mean? It means that we have those orders of ministry and that our priests and bishops and also you at your confirmation, deacons, I was ordained by somebody with a laying on of hands who was ordained by somebody who was ordained by somebody by one of the original apostles. That there's an unbroken chain of laying on of hands from the original disciples all the way down to my ordination and, yes, your confirmation. You've been touched by one of the apostles. Okay? And we believe that something happens at communion. We believe that that bread and the wine truly become the body and blood of Christ. Now, the other apostolic churches, the Roman Catholics, the Orthodox, and increasingly the Lutheran Church is now coming back into apostolic succession, all have different ways of explaining that miracle. And the problem with trying to explain a miracle is it's a miracle. And I would just say, think about the incarnation. Was Jesus God or was he man? Yes, both and. Exactly. Is it bread or is it body? Yes, both and. Is it wine or is it blood? Both and. There you go. And let's not try to parse it out much farther than that. If you want to do transubstantiation, I'm good. If you want to do consubstantiation, I'm good. If you want to do real, whatever doctrine you like, as long as you say, yeah, it is, I'm good. Because it is. So that's the miracle. It becomes the body and blood of Christ. Somehow, some way. Now, who may receive? What was the tradition? Any baptized Christians. Oh, you guys are so smart. See, sometimes when I ask that question, people go, well, after you're confirmed. Now, how many grew up under that system? Yeah, that's not really the tradition unless you go tradition of my lifetime. Then it's the tradition. But if you say tradition, I like to go all the way back 2,000 years, and the tradition was your baptism day was your first communion day. That the decision to wait until confirmation was made unilaterally by a bishop, I think it was the 11th or 12th century, who was not seeing a lot of people coming to him for confirmations. And in those days when people came for confirmations, they brought the bishop what? Yeah, so he put in the rule, not for theological reasons, but for those reasons. Now, some places we have a first communion age of second or third grade because we want people to understand what they're doing, right? You should understand it. I don't understand it. I just believe it. And if we look at the gospel today, Jesus did not explain what he was doing. He did it. He fed them. And then he taught. When each of my children were born, the first thing that happened was they were put on the breast and they were fed. When we are born into the Christian community through our baptism, we need to be fed. And it's not always the adults that get it best. Infants can be communicated. You just dip your pinky in the wine and put it in their mouth. To receive one is to receive both. Doctrine of co-committance. Be impressed. Come on, that goes all the way back. I remembered something from seminary. That's even longer ago. Yeah, to receive one is to receive both. So if you have an allergy to bread, if you have an allergy to wine, to receive one is to receive both. So that's good for everybody to know, because at certain times in our lives, maybe we can't receive one or the other. Okay? Now, kind of in an overreaction to that bishop back in medieval times, there's been this swing towards, well, yeah, if it's really good, then everybody should take it, and it doesn't matter whether they're baptized or not. Yes and no. While I agree that the reality of the sacrament is not based on the belief of the person receiving it, that there is an ontological reality that goes beyond what we understand, I nonetheless believe, as the church has believed since the beginning, that you do need to come into the fold. You need to be a part of the family. You need to be born before you can be fed. We don't feed the kid until it comes out of the chute. Then we feed it. So that is kind of that understanding. So, we've talked about the miracle. We've talked about who can receive. Let's talk about the benefits. First, it's union with Christ. You're receiving his body and blood. And you are enjoying the community of the church. And when we come to this table and we have our meal around it, when we come to the altar of God, who else is there? We say it every Sunday. Angels, archangels, and all the company of heaven. So every Sunday, I get to eat with my parents. Every Sunday, I get to enjoy the company of precious and dear friends and family that have gone on before me. That's why I got to be here in a church that understands and believes that important piece of communion. That this isn't just something that we do in remembrance. It is something that God does also. And that this bread and this wine become the body and blood of Christ. Sure and certain means of God's grace and love for us, and an opportunity for us to participate in the greater church, not just the church that is seen, but the church that, as we say in the creed, that is unseen. And every now and then at this rail, the veil between heaven and earth gets stretched very, very thin, and we get to enjoy, in a real way, the presence of angels and archangels and others. We might hear a choir. We might sense a presence of a friend, or maybe something more. So the Whites came. They heard a sermon that must have been somewhat similar to the one I just preached. And the next day was Monday, and in those days I didn't have an assistant. I didn't have a youth minister. I didn't have any. I did everything. So Sunday was like my longest day. And Mondays were my least favorite morning to greet the kids. But in comes Leon and little Laura White, probably 4 years old, I think. And Leon says, "Hey, we had a good time yesterday." She says, "But Laura has some questions." Questions from a theological questions from a 4-year-old before I've had my first cup of coffee. I sat down. Okay, shoot. She said, "Now Jesus is in heaven with God, right? But he's also in the communion, the bread and the wine. So in heaven are parts of Jesus missing?" Before I could come up with an answer, Leon says, "Tell him the rest." Laura says to me, "I saw Jesus." Okay, also at this church there was a 2-year-old, the robe, the beard, who was convinced I was Jesus. "Mom, Dad, can we go to that church where Jesus is?" And I said to Laura, "Laura, you don't." She goes, "Oh, no." She was under no illusions. I was not Jesus. I said, "Okay, good." And then I thought about who my lay readers and chalice bearers were. And that particular Sunday had been all women. And I said, "Well, you didn't mean one of the people that were up doing the..." She goes, "No, I saw Jesus." And I said, "Well, where was he?" And she says, "He was right by the altar. And he was standing there, and he was smiling at me." And I said, "Were any parts missing?" She said, "No." And I said, "Good, go play." When you come up here, whether you can see it or not, Jesus will be here.